Hey, everybody, Nancy here from American Pet Professionals. Welcome back to another Tuesday digging into the pet industry. We are live on Facebook and YouTube and potentially LinkedIn as well. So, wherever you're watching from, please thank you for being here. And if you're listening to a future podcast episode today, thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited to introduce you to our next APP member and guest for today's show, Deborah Turner of Dean Insurance Agency. Hey, Debbie, how are you?
I'm doing great. And you, Nancy?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
So listen, Debbie, on digging into the pet industry, we dig right into your story and how you got into the pet industry. So I know that you've worked for insurance for many years. And can you go back a little bit on how you got in on insurance and then how you wanted to add dog protection for dog parents and their dogs?
I actually have a degree in insurance and the equivalent of a master's degree, and I adopted a little personality challenge schnauzer back in 2000, and I got to studying everything I could find about dogs. I took classes, read about 40, 50 books. I mean, I just was a sponge. And it dawned on me one day that the insurance industry as a whole does not quite understand how to underwrite the canine liability exposure. So I started a research paper, which is something they ask us to do with the CPCU Society. And I had somebody come forward and say, no, 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 this needs to be a policy. People need this coverage. And that was 2010. I brought it to the market in 2012.
Okay, so wow. So you've been doing this for quite a while for the pet industry, for pet parents, and you have a background, a pretty tremendous background in insurance. So that's really great to know. So let's start with the basics. And for anybody watching, we're not talking about pet health insurance. We're talking about canine liability insurance, right? So why don't you explain to everybody what that is?
Well, it used to be, and most people assume it still is covered by the homeowners or the renters policy.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, that has been that is systematically being removed from the policies. If you're in Florida, for example, when it goes through Citizens, they write a very stripped down policy that covers very basic, very basic exposures. So this policy is a standalone policy, and you purchase it to close that gap between your homeowners and not having any coverage. And or if your dog has a rap sheet, very often I can write those. Some cities, counties, municipalities have certain breed requirements, and we can write those dogs as well. We do not underwrite. We write all the breeds. There's no dangerous dog breed that comes in here.
So all the breeds, no matter if they have a bite history in the past or an incident or anything like that, that's good to know.
Yeah, it just depends on the incident. I mean,
Right,
if they chase somebody down and maul them, that's one thing. But
right.
if the package guy goes to, or UPS guy goes to hand you a package and the dog does one bite
Yeah,
and release at the door, that's not an aggressive dog. That's a dog protecting his home.
right, right. Yeah. Well, that's a good distinction between the two. So let me ask you this. You were talking about how it's different than regular homeowners insurance, and regular homeowners insurance, I think most people don't even realize that might not cover an incident if something happens with their dog. Is that true to say?
It used to pretty well be included, but now the canine liability claims account for 1/3 of all liability claims under homeowners and renters policies. So very often you will see it completely excluded. And I'm going to jump off here for a second. Insurance is actually very easy. It covers what it doesn't exclude. So if you want to know what your policy covers, you want to read the exclusions. So they're just exclude all animal liability. So even if you have a parakeet and it pokes somebody in the eye, that wouldn't be covered, although I do not sell that coverage.
Okay. This is just for dogs.
Just for dogs.
Right, okay. Well, we hope nobody's parakeet pokes anybody in the eye, but I can see that. Some of those big parrots with the big I'm like,
Toucans.
yeah, yeah, that they're they're sharp and pointy, you have to know the bird, right? So that's really interesting. So I think like in New York State a couple last year, now statewide, there's you cannot deem you cannot what's the word proper wording I'm saying? You can no longer not insure a home if you have a certain breed of dog, which is something that I worked on for a long, long time to try to get that changed. And it was finally turned changed into law. So, we used to always promote certain insurance companies, but most of them, like we heard all the horror stories of people losing their homeowners insurance because they had, a very common dog, right? Doesn't matter the breed. And it would be horrible. They would be like, we've been with the same insurance company for 25 years, and the agent came out to check on some home, improvements we were doing, and they've said, oh, you have this dog, we're dropping your insurance. So now they can't do that. Can you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah. Insurance companies are for profit. Some reason that is a nasty thing to say. I'm not sure why.
Better
So
business.
they have to have an exposure that they can underwrite. And for whatever reason, if they ask the right questions about canine liability, they misinterpret the answers. So, for example, except in California, where State Farm just pulled out. Oops, sorry, lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Except, ex, sorry.
So you were saying we were talking about homeowners insurance, and that in New York State they can no longer, deny you coverage based on the breed of dog that you have, which is a
Right,
wonderful thing.
right. The companies have to be able to underwrite an exposure. So if they can't underwrite when a hurricane's coming, or when they can't underwrite when an earthquake's coming, they will often pull out.
Hmm.
And so here in Florida, we're down to just a handful of companies that will write insurance, because
Yeah.
we have a sinkhole problem and we have flood issues, and wind damage. So the companies, if they just can't get a handle on this dog liability thing, they will either completely exclude it from the policies, or in some cases, they may actually pull out, which the less insurance companies you have, the less competition you have.
Right. Interesting. So it's actually good for your company then, because you can write those policies for people that are looking for additional coverage for their dog.
That's true, except my problem is people don't know that this type of product exists. Even most agents don't know it exists. There's only 4 of us in the entire country that write this coverage.
Wow.
So,
So
it
what tips would you give dog parents that are just hearing about this for the first time?
um, please don't say my dog will just lick you to death. In fact, there is a bacteria in dogs' mouths that will in fact kill you
Oh,
if it gets
geez.
into your bloodstream. And everybody says my dog would never bite. Well, given the right set of circumstances, even a well-trained dog may decide it's his job to protect you, or it's something that he fears for his life, and so he'll respond. 90% of the claims I get are bite and release,
Hmm.
which is a stop what you're doing, because the only thing the dogs have is their mouth.
Yeah.
They can't tell you any other way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense. I worked with a client years ago, that was helping them with dog training. But I mean, I wasn't even a dog trainer, but they wanted me to work with them because they knew I worked with dogs, and they had a dog that jumped up and bit their friend because everybody jumped up cheering for a football game, and the dog got startled. But I will tell you, it was the second bite case. The first was a family member. So, they were lucky that it was a good friend and they weren't going to, try to go after them. But I was like, maybe if you know the dog might bite, not have it in the room with everybody that's cheering for a football game.
What people don't understand with dogs is they like routine,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you get 10 people over your house. Maybe they're having a beer, maybe they're having a drink, and they're watching a football game, and they get excited, and that's too much.
Yeah.
When I took scuba diving, they told us that it's like a pie. You get scared, one little piece, now they're yelling, now they're drinking, now they're moving around, hopping around, and eventually you reach the point where you just explode because you can't. It's too much. It's too much overkill, and that's what
Yeah.
will cause a dog to lash out when he
Yeah.
normally wouldn't.
And sometimes it could just be in play mode too, right? Like the dog's not as being aggressive, but people don't understand the body language of a dog. So I think there's a lot that goes into that, as a pet parent. But for pet parents that are like just hearing about this, and they're like, but I have homeowners insurance, what would you tell them to do as like to find out if they actually have proper coverage?
Well, one, they can always ask their agent. Two, if they have an animal exclusion on the policy, they don't have coverage. And three is something called a sublimit. So very often they will sublimit the canine liability exposure, which just simply means if the policy carries a $300,000 limit, but they have sublimited canine exposures to 25,000. If there's an incident, the most that they're going to pay out on a canine related incident is the 25,000. And the average claim right now is running over 52,000.
Oh, wow. So they really need to check with their agent and understand what those numbers mean because they can seem confusing, those numbers. That's really, really great information. So does the canine liability insurance also apply to renters?
Well, you can renters are in the same boat as homeowners or condo owners or any other residential type
Okay.
buildings. The companies are treating the canine like exposure like it is one exposure. So they're taking out of all kinds of policies,
Okay.
renters, condo, you name it.
That's great. That's great. So if you're renting or maybe in college in a house type of thing and you have a dog, it's something you should seriously think about. So what does it cover? An incident in the home, on your property, inside that kind of thing?
No, if the dog were to bite, scratch, scare, trip, knock someone over, run out in front of a car causing property damage, injure another domestic animal on or off your premises anywhere in the United States, we would pay the medical defense and the settlement up to the policy, and we do not have a deductible.
Okay. All right.
Most policies do have a deductible.
So that's a lot of things that it does cover then.
Yeah, it's not just dog bite coverage by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination. I mean, we
Okay.
had a guy's dog who I don't understand. He got up on a car and clawed it, and we
Oh,
painted that car.
yeah. Yeah. Now I can understand that. This is going to sound crazy, but when I first adopted my dog Cody, he was in the shelter for 6 months and I think that he lived in a car before whoever dumped him, right? And he didn't have any kind of abuse. I think maybe it was a sad situation that he lived in the car with somebody because he loves being in the car. And the first like week that I had him, every time we went past a car, he would literally rear up close to the car. And I'm like, no. So I can see the scratching nails and, the car owner not being happy about that. Luckily, I never let Cody get close to any car, but it was just really like, it was so weird. I was like, what is going on with this dog? But he got over it with some training, right? So we did a lot of training walking around cars. Now he could care less. But it is interesting. So what happens if another dog runs up on your property, you have the canine liability insurance and a fight happens? Who's liable there?
Well, there's technically and there's reality. Technically, the dogs that runs onto your property, the owner should be held liable. But for some reason, our society has gotten crazy. If your dog is the large dog in the fight and
Hmm,
the little dog loses, they're going to blame your dog and they're going to sue you. There's no logic to that, but that's what's
yeah.
happening every day. So it
I
depends.
I think it's different in each state too, right? Like here in New York, I used to teach responsible dog ownership classes, and the law literally says that if your dog is on a leash and another dog comes up off leash and that dog gets injured, the person with holding the dog on a leash being responsible is not liable. No?
That's not the way the courts are handling it.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting.
very sad.
Yeah, that is sad because you're being the responsible pet owner. Okay, well, thank you for that information. What about an example of a dog parent who's coming to you for liability insurance after an incident happens? Let's say, like you said, there was a bite and release, right? Maybe the dog got spooked or something like that, and now they have to add liability insurance. What happens with that?
We have in the system, the program is fully automated, so you can go from the first question to a policy. I had one guy do it in 6 minutes. That's the winning record right now. Um, so you would go through the questions, and you're probably going to get what's called a referral, meaning it has to be reviewed by the underwriters before the decision is made that you can purchase it or that you cannot purchase the policy. The thing that people need to know if there's been an incident is tell us tell us the story. Don't just say my dog bit another dog. What happened? Well, if your dog was approached off and the other dog's off leash, that changes the whole
Yeah,
picture right there because you're responsible, obviously. Your dog really wasn't the aggressor, but it doesn't mean you won't get sued. So it all depends on the circumstances that you're faced with at the time of the claim.
interesting. But I also think nowadays more people have video footage on their houses, so that could help in a court if it wasn't their dog's fault, right?
I, I'm sorry, but when they go to court, depending on sometimes the breed of the dog, the courts will find in favor of any other breed.
Mm,
I did not know this until I started writing this particular program. But if you go in and your dog was, you know how kids will jump on a dog trying to like a horse,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and the dog whips around, bites the kid on the leg. Well, the dog's been provoked.
yeah.
Um, and the homeowner's insurance policy says, oh, well, we've got an exclusion for canine liability, so no coverage. The judges will actually rewrite that policy on the bench and say to the insurance company, you need to pay the full 300,000. She's a beautiful little girl. She's probably going to need plastic
Yeah,
surgery.
yeah.
And there's no logic to it, but I
No,
will tell you it's consistent through the country.
interesting. We gotta educate those judges. You
Well,
know?
there's actually a couple trying to do just that because the judges don't understand
Right.
dog behavior.
Yeah. That is a part of the problem. I mean, that could be a whole nother podcast episode with people not understanding dog behavior. We used to talk about that in our classes all the time. And even human behavior, right? Like if you're walking in a park and I'm moving over and I'm putting my dog in a sit stay so you can pass, that means just keep walking. Don't let your dog in our space. And my dog is super friendly, but I'm very good at reading other dogs' body language, especially when people are like, he's friendly. And I'm like, doesn't look it. Regardless of the breed or the size, I'm like, I'm going to protect my dog always. I'm going to move him over. But people don't cue into that. They're so focused
Mhm.
on, like, oh, another dog, let's go say hi. And same type of thing with people not understanding the dog body language. It's so true.
Um, the thing people really need to understand that regardless of the dress you put on the dog or cute little hat, it's still an animal at the
Yep.
end of the day. So
Mhm.
I had taken my 3 I have small dogs in a stroller, one to keep them off the grass because of possible diseases that could be in the grass,
Yep.
but to protect them from larger dogs. And I
Mhm.
turned around and looked, and this lady's Great Dane had its head in
In the stroller.
in the stroller. And I'm like, ma'am, could you please control your dog? Well, she
Yeah.
got aggressive with me, stating that her dog wasn't doing anything wrong, but my dog weighs 4 pounds. If
Yeah.
that dog had just touched her on the head with
Yep.
any kind of pressure, she could have it could have easily killed
Just
her.
not knowing its own body strength. Yeah,
Right.
it is frustrating with that, and I think that, this is a good point to bring up, not just learning the body language, but also understanding what your insurance coverage covers because, you know, I have another question. What if somebody brings their dog to work with them, right? So, or their office, does the policy extend to that, or do you need separate policies?
No, you can endorse this policy.
Okay.
Any of the 4 you can endorse to allow you to take your dog onto the premises.
Mhm.
It costs a little extra because there's higher exposure there,
Right.
but it shouldn't be a problem getting that coverage.
And then they could name them additionally insured for your office building or your business, that type of thing.
You can add them as additional insureds. So
Hmm.
when I took my dogs to my office, I would have Dean Insurance Agency
Yep.
and then the company that held the property
Same.
as
Yeah.
additional insureds.
Yep. I did the same when I used to bring my old guy Max to my office. It was just me in the office, but I had the same thing with the initially insured. So it would be, that was a while ago now, but just to protect my business and myself and all of that. So what if the dog, what happens if you hire a pet sitter or a dog trainer and they take your dog with potential incident history? Maybe it was a bite, maybe it was a scratch, provoked thing, and now they're walking the dog or training the dog off of your property. I know most dog trainers and pet sitters have their own insurance, but if something happens while they're taking your dog out, it gets kind of wonky there, right?
I'm not sure I agree with them all having coverage.
They should.
They
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
But if your dog were to be under the care, custody, control of, say, the veterinarian, the groomer, the dog walker, the trainer, this policy would respond so that if the dog bit somebody else's dog in the practice ring, and you get sued, then you would be covered.
Oh, wow. That's amazing that it covers that. I think that if anybody was not paying attention, they should listen to that because that's really great coverage because a lot of people don't always think of that when they're hiring a pet sitter to make sure that they're bonded and insured. Same thing with a dog trainer, like going out and doing all the things, taking your dog off the premises. So that's great to know. Can you have multiple dogs under one policy?
Yes, you can
Okay.
have up to 8 on this policy, and we'd just have to endorse or something if you had more than that. One
Wow.
thing I do wanna point out is, and you mentioned it, is the on and off premises coverage. Even though a homeowner's policy may have full, um, canine liability up to the policy limits, if they do not have off premises, that means if your dog climbs under the fence, gets out of the door, breaks a leash in the front yard, and it leaves your property, then you have no coverage. So
Interesting.
you would need to ask your agent, do I have
Off
canine
premises.
liability? And does it include off premises
Wow.
coverage?
That's really good to know. Off premises coverage. I'm writing
Mhm.
that down. That's really good to know. Okay, so all right, I think I asked all of that. What about here's another one for you. What about people who foster dogs and puppies for an animal rescue? Would the animal rescues insurance apply, hoping that they're insured, additionally insured type of thing? Like if you say I'm like, I'm gonna foster a bunch of puppies or dogs, or would the foster still require their own insurance?
No, they would need to look to the rescue
Okay.
to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of rescues are cash strapped,
Yeah.
and rightfully
Right.
so. They use the money for the dogs.
Yeah.
But a lot of the underwriting comes from my personal history. And the only dog that has ever bitten me was one I had just brought home. It was an turn in. And it turned out the dog was crazy, but they just dumped it on us as
Oh,
opposed to dumping it at a shelter.
yeah.
And so there's too many unknowns with a dog that is being fostered. Now, the next question is, well, then why do I insure a dog that's just been adopted out of the shelter? And just because.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know what? I think people that are bringing a dog home to adopt the dog is a little bit different than fostering a dog that maybe just the shelter is full with foster dogs. But,
Right.
I think it's a little bit different. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about this type of homeowners insurance or liability insurance, excuse me, that you would like to add? Because I feel like there's a lot of intricacies to it.
Um, yes, I would really ask that people foresee the situations they're putting their dogs in,
Hmm.
and they set them up for these claims. The other thing, even more important, is very often the victims are the ones causing the claims.
Hmm.
But in most states, if it's provoked or not, it doesn't matter. They're
Yeah.
going to hold the owner responsible or find some way to. So
Yeah,
really need to be aware.
that's really good advice, so you're not setting your dog up for failure, right? And a lot of
Mhm.
people don't realize that, and I think we see that or saw that a lot not that people set their dogs up for failure, but just a lot of new pet parents or dog parents coming into the picture in the last few years, especially with all the adoption booms during the pandemic. Just again, like you said, like I always used to say, know your dog, know your breed, and know your mixed breed, because your dog's behavior, if you have a mixed breed, is going to be different behaviors, right? Maybe you have this type of dog that does this, and maybe if you look into how they were bred or what they were bred for, okay, that behavior actually makes sense. And a lot of people don't even do that, right? And as we know, there's a ton of mixed breeds out there now.
If people would only do a little bit of review as to what breed fits their lifestyle,
Right.
and you get an older I have a couple of friends who are older who keep getting Australian cattle
Oh,
dogs.
geez.
Well,
They need
there's
a
a problem.
job.
Yeah, there's a problem there because they are not as energetic as that dog is, which
Right.
leads to poor behavior on the dog's behalf. But he's really not guilty. He's just frustrated.
Right, right. That totally makes sense. Yeah. Research, figure out what's going to be for your lifestyle is such a great piece of important information. And, when it comes to your insurance, do your research and then also figure out what are the things that, are going to keep your dog safe, right? I'm always thinking of my dog first, not the people coming in. I'm like, nope, he doesn't need to be part of this. It's okay. Like, cause I'll get like, where's Cody? How come he's not here? I'm like, he's chilling. He'll come out later after everybody's settled, and he's happy, friendly, go lucky, like all of that, right? But I'm also of the mindset, like you said, like you need to really pay attention to your dog's body language and really make sure that you're focused in on that. So, I'm gonna have a fun question for you. What would you say the best piece of advice you have received in your career has been? Any info on that?
Oh, darn, trick question.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know that anybody told me, but the one thing I say more than anything is keep turning the stone. When I went out to market canine liability, for God's sakes, the entire industry thinks canines are all evil and will bite you in a heartbeat.
Mm,
I called over 70 companies before I found anybody that would even talk to me.
wow.
So you just have to keep looking and flipping that page and looking. And I've called, I've called people who are probably still wondering why I called. But, I don't know where their mindset might be, and it might not be them, but they may very well know someone that, can solve the problem, and that's how I ultimately found the first program.
I love that. Keep turning the stone, kind of like don't ever give up, keep going until you find that right match. Well, I'm
Right.
really happy that you kept turning that stone, because if you didn't, we wouldn't be here talking about canine liability insurance. That is so important, that I think really protects not just yourself, your home, but it also protects your dog, right? Wouldn't you say that is the truth?
Um, your dog's not covered for any injuries they sustain, that would fall
Right.
under the health insurance. But being aware that you can very easily get sued for the least little thing. I had a golden retriever that came through at the long time ago, and the dog was 8 years old, and at 6 months, he had scratched a toddler, and
Mm,
that dog was labeled dangerous for life. And when you get your dog labeled dangerous, it's horrific what they make you do, and
yep.
thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So don't wait to see if your dog might, assume he will, and then that
Yes.
way you're gonna save both you and possibly your dog's life.
Yeah, that's such good advice. It's so true. That's so sad for that dog. I mean, I've seen cases like that too, where it was a very minor thing, and the people were upset, understandably. But a lot of times, kids come running up to your dog,
Yep.
and the parents, they think that it's your fault if the dog's making noise. My dog, I'm very fortunate. He's happy-go-lucky, but I always make them ask, and if they don't ask, or if they're too chaotic, I'm like, "Oh, not today, guys," and I keep walking. Just because I want to always protect my dog first.
Right. People are so entitled, and they'll actually argue with you. If you say, "No, please don't pet my dog."
Yeah.
Well, it's A, none of their business why you don't want them petting their dog, and maybe there is a reason that you don't want them petting that dog. And I have a little 4-pound dog who was kept in a crate her first 18 months, and
Oh,
she's antisocial, and she always will be, and I hold her about chest height, and one too many times I told people, "She wasn't socialized, please don't come any closer," and
yeah,
had them reach right over me into my space and go to pet her, and she bites them.
yeah.
Fortunately, she has no teeth, but, it's still it wouldn't matter if she had teeth and she hurt them.
Yeah,
I would be
yeah,
on the line for that.
yeah, yeah. I laughed because my friend has a dog that has no teeth, and he's a little nippy too. I'm like, "Your dog is gumming me."
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's so true. I mean, I will tell you one piece of advice that I'll give you guys is that if I don't want somebody to say hi to my dog when I'm out walking with him, or if I feel like the dog coming towards us, I don't want him to say hi because I don't let him say hi to every dog at all. I'll just say, "Oh, we're training today. Not today, we're training," very nicely, no attitude, and just keep walking. And that's just kind of the easiest thing because people kind of get that quicker than like, "Don't come over and pet my dog. Oh, we're in training today." And that kind of stops them in their tracks.
Um, One thing that will work is to muzzle your dog, and it sounds horribly cruel. You can train them into the muzzle,
Muzzle.
but, they're not gonna bite anybody that way.
Yeah.
And if you have a new dog that you don't know how they may respond out in public, or you have a dog that has maybe nipped someone in the past, people might wanna consider it because they know that their dog has already had this behavior.
Yeah.
So to protect their dog from accidentally doing it again and ending up being declared dangerous is worth gold.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of really great dog trainers out there that can help you teach the
True.
dog how to go into that muzzle. And for some dogs, like my own dog who loves to eat everything like a horse when I'm walking him through the trails, that could actually be helpful, but he's never had a muzzle on. But, I just am always paying attention to his behavior. I really think that this is such great information. So how can we get people to know more about canine liability insurance? Obviously, watching this, sharing this, but what would you say to somebody that is a new dog parent that has never heard of this? Like, how can we get that out there?
It's very difficult to find this coverage because there are only 4 markets in the entire country. My personal website is www.dogbite, B-I-T-E, quote, quote.com. They can Google canine liability and
Okay.
find the other 3. Um, and the policies are extremely different. They're what's called manuscript policies, meaning each one is written individually. So you really need to have a comfort for what the policy is going to cover and if it's going to cover what your exposure is.
Okay, that's really great information. And we'll put the link to your website in the show notes and also in the comment section for wherever anybody's watching. They can click on that and find you. And then I just think that if anybody's watching, if this is new to you and new information, or if you're listening on the podcast, please share this information because this could really help new dog parents and help dogs that are, getting adopted into homes and, give you peace of mind knowing that you have that coverage that you may not have, but you might think you have with your homeowner's
Yeah.
insurance. Debbie, I appreciate you so much for being here today and giving us all this information. I definitely learned a lot. And one of our fans and friends said it's news to me. So, all right, Georgiana, that's great. So I'm glad to hear it. And we'll keep promoting this out there so more people can learn about it and be informed in what to do. Um, I think you have a ton of great information on your website. If anybody needs to know more information, you can obviously reach out to Debbie, but also check out her FAQs on the website because there's so much information on there. The one thing we didn't say is that the coverage is annual, correct? So if you buy a
Yes.
policy, it's annual.
All of the policies are annual.
Okay.
And my phone number is on the website. So if there are questions that don't seem to fit the questions, feel free to
Okay.
call me.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Debbie, for
Thank
being
you.
here, for everybody for tuning in and listening. And I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. And we'll see you soon again on Digging into the Pet Industry. Thanks, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye.